should go hide behind a pillar. Please don't. Please stay here.
Or let Philip know, who can let the camera person know.
Yeah, oh, that's such a reasonable idea.
In case you don't want to.
Elizabeth is doing ASL interpretation. Thank you. Oh, nice. If you would like to avail yourself of that, we've reserved some seats here. So move here if that is your desire. And there are water fountains around this corner here behind those cameras. There's a men's restroom there, a women's restroom back there. I think that's most of that. Upstairs.
Is it gender nonconforming?
Well, I don't know.
Unsure.
Anyone who wants to explore can tell us. All right, should we go over the agenda?
Let's do it.
All right. Mark Milano has put together a great video that we're going to show in a minute after we explain this agenda.
And then after the video, we're going to have a few speakers talk about the legacy of Stonewall, what Reclaim Pride itself has done over the last few years, what we're planning for 2019 in terms of what's come out of other town halls like this and other discussions.
Then we'll bring you up to date on where we stand today with planning. I would say several dozen of us have been meeting for the last few months. We've done a lot of things, so we'll bring you up to date on all of that. And then we'll get to the handout that you've got. We'll discuss the questions and proposals, because we want to get input from those of you who haven't been attending these meetings to see if you have newer, better ideas, and reach some consensus on the plan, and then move on, once we have all that in place, to a discussion of getting to work on this.
So we have 5 working committees that have been in play for a few months now, but those committees are in need of more help, and folks who want to get involved in those arenas. We'll talk more specifically about what they are, where everyone can jump in at, and how to stay involved and get active.
All right, we want to start by giving you a little visual representation. So Mark Milano, where'd you go, Mark? There. Has put together 3 minutes of video that includes the original 1970 Christopher Street Liberation Day march up 6th Avenue and into Central Park. The Stonewall 25 from 1994 celebration with 2 marches, the city-sanctioned 1st Avenue March with the mile-long rainbow flag, and the, what I like to think of as the more rogue march up 5th Avenue, not permitted, but sanctioned by the city to the extent that they facilitated it happening, ending up in Central Park with a rally and speakers and everything. And then we will entertain you with some footage of the 2018 Heritage of Pride Parade.
March to nowhere.
March to nowhere, yes. I think you will note some differences. And we will end with a little more footage of the Stonewall 25 event, just to reinforce the image of what we hope this march and rally will be. So let's hit the video.
Hello.
Hi, Andy.
I
I don't believe either of you said your pronouns when you introduced.
Oh, is that why they look so
Yeah.
good? Looking at the Comedy Central float.
Thank you to ABC for partnering with us. You bet. NYPD band ceremonial units giving its support to the LGBTQ community and specifically to the Gay Officers Action League of New York. And we also have the New York City Department of Correction Gay Officers Action League here. These are the people that control the prisons.
In 3 minutes and 15 seconds. But to expound a little more vividly and personally on the history, Jim Farrat has agreed to fill us in on his personal experiences. He was there at the Stonewall Rebellion in 1969.
There. Is it on? Could you turn it on, please?
Testing.
All right, now can everyone hear? Thank you. Gilbert Baker, I love you. You know, that mile-long rainbow flag, no matter where you stand on whatever side or whatever division there may be amongst us about something specific, that rainbow flag to me is the unity of who we are and what we've always been. And when you look at what goes on in the Eastern European countries, in Moscow and Poland and places like that, when people brave enough as we were in 1970 to march up that Fifth Avenue, all 200 of us, not without any police barricades, without any police protection, fearlessly and well received, by the way, by the people that stood on the sidelines. But we did not know that when we marched there. But those young people and those today who get beaten up by neo-Nazis and by government forces, what are they carrying? They're carrying a rainbow flag. And I'm not speaking against any other kind of flag. Let all the flags fly. Let 100 flags fly. But don't ever forget that Gilbert Baker's flag is the one unity symbol that we have around the world. Stonewall. Forget about the bar. Forget about the mafia. Forget, to some degree, about the false story of the police and a riot, and think of this. On the street, in front of the Stonewall, for the first time that I've ever seen it, gay men, and it was principally gay men, young men for the most part, in the early part of that Saturday night evening, the Friday night evening, I was in front of the Stonewall by happenstance because I live around the corner when it first started. When they took that woman, passing woman, this is a woman that, I'm using the language of that year, not the language we have here, because language is always changing, so I'm going to respect the language that we had. Called a passing woman, a very butch bull dyke would be the way people would put her down. Dragged her out of the bar, in her handcuffs, put her in a police car, and two cops that went to get their payoff. That's what they don't want you to remember. They don't want you to remember that it was graft that was behind all of this. All the police spin, all the Daily News articles, everything was to take it away from what actually happened. Cops, something went wrong inside that bar when the cops went to get their payoff. This woman put her in the police car. She, true to her gender expression, started rocking back and forth. Much to her surprise, and to the about 50 people that had gathered at this point in front of the bar, one of the doors popped open. They hadn't locked it. She jumped out very triumphantly, and true to her gender expression, started throwing her short, stout, bulky body against the door of the police car. The car started to tip. Didn't tip over, but there was a moment that I will never forget that sparked across the world a message that changed forever how we see ourselves, despite our racial differences, despite our age differences, despite cultural differences. Lesbians and gay men of all gender expression suddenly rebelled against internalized homophobia. Internalized homophobia. I don't think there's a person in this room that doesn't know what that word means. And felt for the first time the spark of freedom. We were not in a bar. We were not in the bushes. We were not in toilets in the subway, the places that they allowed us to be as gay men. We were in the street and we saw each other. I wish I was more magical and I could tell you what that moment was like, but it was so spontaneous. By the way, don't use the word riot. I know it was in the film, and I know why they were chanting it, but it was not a riot. That is a straight 60s template. They want to box us in. We queers, we gender adventurous, I don't know what I want to use today because it changes every day, but I mean all of us, regardless of our gender expression, our age, our weight, our color, do things differently. That first night was more of a party than it was a riot, because people for the first time were in the streets celebrating something they had never been able to do before. The homophobia in the left, the homophobia in the right, the homophobia in the laws that existed at the time kept us in the closet, except we went into a bar or a toilet or some park someplace. I'm talking about the men. The women will talk about their own experiences. Pushing ahead, third night, the Gay Liberation Front was formed in a building on the corner of 6th Avenue and 14th Street, and we had about 200 people. Now, you can't imagine what it is like if you've never talked to people outside of the bar situation. You know, people gathered there and they didn't know how to talk about why they were there, literally. And we passed a little talking stick around. It went around the room. It takes a lot of time to give 5 minutes to every person that talking stick around the room, and many people could not speak. They just held that talking stick. And we remained silent because we hadn't learned how to speak out about who we were and why we were there. But the one thing that shocked me and many of the lesbians that were there was the one thing that people said over and over and over and over again is, I want to hold my boyfriend or my girlfriend's hand when I walk down the street, and I want to get married. A small cry went up in a corner of the room from the radical lesbians who thought marriage was enslavement. But that desire brought us to same-sex civil marriage. And please, use the term same-sex civil marriage. It's not marriage equality. That's some politician's idea of getting rid of having to say gay or talk about sex or anything like that. With all respect to Kathy, who worked so hard on marriage equality, all respect to all of you. But from the very beginning, that was the desire. Not us radicals. We wanted revolution in our lifetime. Okay? So the year went on. Another group formed about 10 months later called the Gay Activist Alliance, 99% men, and it was a fundamental difference. They had been mentored by members of the Mattachine Society. I'll be very fast, Sam. Where are you? I know you told me I had 5 minutes. Okay. The Gay Activist Alliance. There was a major difference between the politics of the Gay Liberation Front. We were co-gendered. We had gender parity, which meant that if we ever had a vote, the women had half the votes, regardless if they were half the room or not. That was to bring about equality among the genders of the thing. We were multi-issue because we were diverse. If you were a person of color and you were at that meeting, and there were persons of color at that meeting and the subsequent meetings, you had other things you wanted to deal with too. And I remember learning about dual oppression. When we had the poster, the recruitment poster that our newspaper wanted to put out, people running in the street, you may have seen it, says, "Come join the Sisters and Brothers of the Gay Liberation Front." You see only white faces in that poster. Why? 3 people of color, 2 men and a woman, showed up, and anyone who showed up was in that photograph. And each one of them had the same story. I saw my grandmother. I saw the principal at the school I teach in. I saw this one. They weren't out to their family, or they weren't out in their workplace, and they're worried about losing their jobs. It made me understand Jimmy Baldwin much better when I realized it was easier for me as a white gay man, no matter what my class was, no matter how I operated in the world, than it was for most people of color to come out in that time. Moving forward, I want to say thank you to the Reclaim Pride people that have been trying to organize. I think everything that is on that sheet I agree with, but I want to warn you, or ask you please, or gently hug you into saying, the people that are marching are not the enemy. I cannot, in my heart, let alone in my politic, say the 200 or the 800, and those numbers should be really talked about, people from JetBlue, for example, who are out on the job. The reason that that has happened is because our LGBT union activists have done that over the last almost 50 years, 40 years. They've gone and gotten the unions to accept us as equals. And I'm not going to tell someone not to be out on their job and not to be marched with that. You have the challenge of figuring out, this is a world event. It's not an American event. It's not a New York City event. Do we want to separate ourselves from all the people from around the world that have come out because of what happened on Christopher Street in 1969? Or do we want to find a way to be in that march with all of our politics and all of our anger correctly placed at who it should be placed at? I would like to see, and I will do whatever the consensus of the group is. I truly mean that. I speak for myself. GLF doesn't have a spokesperson. We didn't believe in leadership, so no one can say they do. You have to decide what is the best thing to do. I wish we could join in, have our radical position, and at 23rd Street, wherever the hell they cut it off, we just continue marching up to Central Park, with or without a permit. That's what happened in the first march. We marched.
Just a note, we're not against those people. We're not against that march. They're welcome to join us. No floats. All right, so Stonewall 25. Okay. And then Colin will do everything since then. Well, Jim captures the spirit of the rebellion in 1969. Flash forward 25 years to 1994. And hello, Norman Siegel, who is our wonderful civil rights lawyer who is working with us on this. In 1994, we wanted to celebrate Stonewall 25 years. Giuliani was the mayor. He knew it was going to be a big deal. We had the gay games here. The city was awash in gay, 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 gay. It's only going to be 10 times bigger next year, by the way. But he didn't want any of that, and so what he thought was that the Stonewall 25 March should be in the Bronx. We love the Bronx. That wasn't where we wanted the march. So the people who were running the Stonewall 25 March negotiated with the city, fought back and forth, and succeeded finally in getting as a compromise First Avenue. March up First Avenue. That's where you saw the mile-long rainbow flag. But those of us in ACT UP and other groups thought that that was too much of a compromise with the city. We didn't want to be on First Avenue. We wanted, first of all, to start in the Village. That march was starting at 42nd and First. And we wanted to march up Fifth Avenue. So we went to court, and in fact, Norman represented us in court 25 years ago. And the end result was, after much to-ing and fro-ing, the court said, yes, you have a right to a second march. You have a different message, a more radical message, and not what the city wants you to do. So you should have a right to a permit and a march, but the city is telling me that the cops can't handle it. Because the great New York City Police Department cannot handle 2 marches on the same day, ending up at the same place in Central Park. And so we argued some more. We were in court till Friday before the Sunday marches. You think we're late now. Wow. But in the end, after going all around this, the First Avenue March offered to come over and meet up with us and go up Fifth. The cops said, no, we've already made our assignments of where the cops are going to be on First Avenue. It's all bullshit. So the city said, all right, we're not going to give you an official permit because, we can't establish precedents or anything. But we will allow you to have your march up Fifth Avenue, and we will facilitate it and make sure it's okay. So as you saw in the video, there were 2 marches in 1994. An enormous one up First Avenue, enormous, hundreds of thousands of people, maybe 1 million, I don't know, and thousands more going up Fifth Avenue from Sheridan Square, meeting at Central Park and having a big event on the Great Lawn. That stage you saw at the end, that was filled with speakers and performers on the Great Lawn in Central Park. And it was an enormously successful event. It was completely safe and peaceful. Everybody had a great time. And basically, that's a lot of what we want to do next year. A little different because Heritage of Pride is not going to run the Pride Parade up into Central Park, although they could change their minds. We don't, because they haven't announced a plan yet, except that we think they're ending up with a big event in Times Square. We want to end up with a big event in Central Park. Colin.
Lovely.
Is that working?
Yes.
Can use this one
So I'll make this brief, but I think thank you, Jim, for reminding us of the complexity of the Stonewall riots, how it started, and the importance of that history. I think when we think about that and we think about Mark's video and what Ann said about Stonewall 25, it brings us to this moment in a question about what does our liberation look like? What does our desire to celebrate, to remember the Gay Liberation Front, the Stonewall riots, all of those struggles for our equality, our liberation look like today? As well as how do we recognize the way our communities in terms of people in their similarities as well as their differences, what do we still struggle with today, and how do we represent that to the world, right? The problem is not the workers of JetBlue, right? The problem is that JetBlue, T-Mobile have become stand-ins for our struggle. Our commodification has become the image of our struggle to the world, not our fight back, not our sense of community, not our struggle, right? And this is what has brought Reclaim Pride here today, right? with that in mind, the last 2 years, as part of a resistance contingent that started with the election of Trump, and I think the recognition for a lot of folks that what we think of in terms of the rights that we have established aren't necessarily guaranteed. So 2 years ago, a resistance contingent was formed of various groups, organizations, individuals that wanted to express dissent, wanted to express a sense of community that was dedicated to continuing the struggle for ourselves and for other marginalized communities, right? Last year, in the same vein, or this past year, a bunch of us not only wanted to continue that spirit, but also rejected a lot of the new restrictions that were being placed on marchers, right? The continual limitation of who could participate, the fact that the wristbands that were required, the increasing police presence, the barricades actually are a hindrance to a lot of in our community in terms of a lot of our immigrants in our communities, people of color, as well as folks with disabilities, where those barricades just become a disaster, right? The length of the march, its route to nowhere, did not signify what many of us in this room think a commiseration of our liberty should look like. So for the past few months, those of us who participated in the march have been organizing in holding town halls, seeking community input, and we tried to work with and engage in dialogue with Heritage of Pride, the organization that leads the march, and we discovered that our visions are different, and that agreement was not going to happen, and that next year, the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, the fact that World Pride is going to be in New York, meant that we had to part ways and create a resistance march that was about human rights, about social justice, about continuing our struggle to fight onward for our liberation. And that brings us to today and how we will make that happen going forward, and all of the nitty-gritty details that such a march entails. So thank you again, everyone, for coming. I will now pass it to Ann.
Join me. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Colin. Very eloquent. So now we come to this document. We have, I agree with Colin with all of that. We tried very hard to get Heritage of Pride to work with us with this vision. And to Jim's point, we discussed many scenarios of joining, but they really want to keep people out of the parade, feature the corporate floats, and limit human participation. So that just was not going to work for us. So I invite you to turn to the back of this paper. Has everyone got this? Does anyone need a copy of this? We have many here. All right. So we would like to just plunge into these, to discussing these points. And the first is that we, in fact, hold a march starting in the Village near Stonewall, Sheridan Square. We've put in a permit application with the NYPD, ever hopeful, to assemble at Sheridan Square starting at 10 a.m., to leave Sheridan Square at 11 a.m., marching up 6th Avenue to Central Park. Now, my laugh line is that I've promised the city will do that in 15 minutes. Because one of the city's big complaints is that the Pride Parade takes 9.5 hours. So one of the things that appeals to them about our plan is that while it won't be 15 minutes, we do feel we can march up 6th Avenue to Central Park within a couple of hours if we just march. And by the way, we've had requests already from people who are interested in some kind of transportation because they have a disability or just can't march that far or whatever, and we have promised them that we will provide transportation. And with an minimally barricaded march, and with everybody welcome to join in at any point, anyone is welcome to join anywhere along the route that is comfortable for them, or just show up in Central Park. So, discussion of this plan. Same day. Same day.
And I'll be walking around with the mic for those folks who want to add to the discussion.
We can do that. And the same day as you're taking the mic there is because, and we've discussed this, a couple of things. One, Sunday is the day. Sunday is the big Pride celebration day. So we think what we're doing is fully as important and meaningful, if not more so, than the Pride Parade. So we don't want to take second-class status of going to another day, although the city would certainly like us to. And the Dyke March is on Saturday. They don't want us there. The Drag March is on Friday. There are all sorts of other competing things. And so, yes, it is cheeky, but we feel we have every much right as anyone else to march on Sunday. And part of this presentation was to show that the city could handle 2 events on the same day.
We applied first.
We did. We got our permit applications in first.
Robert, he, him. I wanted to thank Jim. Is he still here? That I do think that I think only 40,000 people are allowed to march it with Heritage of Pride, and they're expecting several million people to come. So I think it is really good to frame our march in having those people who aren't allowed to march to be a part of our march, so to really be encompassing. And now that we've sort of broken from Heritage of Pride, to just leave that and create our own wonderful thing. The other thing is that with Rise and Resist, we've been working a lot with people with disabilities, and a march that long, I mean, I've just started kind of seeing myself as a person with disability, as an older person who can't really walk that far. And so as I was starting to think of the logistics, I was thinking of having like disability access points at Bryant Park where people could sit, at Columbus Circle where people could sit, at the Museum of Natural History. But I'm wondering whether we want to have something that big, whether we have the resources, because that's a lot of human resources to have helpful disability access points. So I think that we really need to think of the disabled in our community and holding them up in the ambitions of this event.
Thank you, Ann. Roberta, she, her. Picking up on that, are the logistics like firmly in place for going up to Central Park instead of doing it the other way where we're near the bars, where we're near a place, I mean, not that that's important, but so, of course it is, but so we're near a place where you can get, water, where people on the way down could like stop using the city's facilities that are there, cafes, watering places to get Coca-Cola if you need one, instead of going to the park. And then what? Vendors. Are there vendors? Is that planned? Oh, okay, I didn't know. All right.
Well,
no, it's nothing?
That is these logistics are the kinds of things we need to consider.
Okay, yeah.
I should have a microphone since we're live streaming. But Leslie Kagan, who was a major organizer of the marches on Washington and anti-war marches and other marches here, I had a long conversation with her about logistics. She said water and porta potties. Water and porta potties. So those have to be put in place. But the idea is, as the original marches and the Stonewall 25 march went uptown, and if we do want to have an event at the end of the march, that's best held in some place like Central Park. And if this is as big as we expect it to be with tens of thousands of people, then that's our thinking. But we're here to hear other ideas like this and figure out something that we can all agree on.
Right, as long as there's facilities, we're not just trapped in the park with nothing, right?
We have to work that out.
Right. Amanda, she, her. Could you just remind us of the route, Heritage of Pride's route, and is there any chance of us meeting them at any point, and like what time do they start?
I can answer if you want me to.
Go ahead,
We don't know their route this year. They have not announced their
didn't
route
say it
this
was the
year.
same
No.
as last
Last year, it began at 17th and 7th Avenue, went down past Stonewall, and up to 29th and 5th. So a march from nowhere to nowhere in a U shape. We don't know at all what their march is this year.
There has been talk of them doing the same route or doing it in reverse configuration, but they have not announced it. But that horseshoe design this year was supposed to be a test run for next year. And I don't know if their march is supposed to go to Times Square and end up there, or if their Times Square event would be later in the evening and people would just congregate there after the march. We don't know because they haven't announced it. But presumably it will be crosstown, and at some point they will go in front of the Stonewall Inn, but they kick off at noon. And our proposed schedule of assembling at 10, kicking off at 11, and getting out of Dodge up 6th Avenue is an attempt not to intersect with them.
Andy Hum from Gay USA. The appeal of this route is that this is the original route of Stonewall in of the Christopher Street Liberation March in 1970. And I wasn't there, but I've seen, and for a while they kept us on 6th Avenue and wouldn't give us the whole of 6th Avenue. There were 2 lanes of traffic running next to us marching, and of course the original people thought they were all going to get shot at, and they ran, but this is the appeal of this route.
Hi, my name is Hector. Pronouns are they, them, theirs. And I think it's a fabulous idea. This idea of kind of a very amoeba-esque type of march reminds me a lot of the Halloween parade, where you just assemble somewhere and there's a clear direction. So, I mean, there's precedent. We know that it works. And I feel like as a community, we put it out, we make it, and we make it happen. So that's why I'm really just excited about, and I think it's great.
Thank you. If we build it, they will come. Eric.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we stay true to the original march route. We're trying to make the point that LGBT rights are still far from where they need to be, not only in this country, which has an assault on every right that we have gained, coming at us to undo those gains by the Congress and by the administration that's in power. But the other purpose of and what happened at the original Stonewall March in the park were political discussions. There were also some entertainment, but they talked a lot about the rights that gay people don't have, that LGBT people don't have, and how much we need to organize, come together as a community, and seize those rights. Remembering that this is World Pride, think about the fact that there's over 70 countries where it's against the law to be gay. And there's 8 countries where there's a death penalty for being accused of being gay. And there's over 40-some countries where there's a minimum jail sentence of 10 years, but in many countries, 25 years in prison for being accused of being gay, not for being, caught having sex, in a park or something. And so my feeling is none of us are free. No LGBT person is free until all LGBT people, and we're really seeing a regression everywhere in the world. There's a concentration camp in Chechnya. In the last couple of months, more than 40 people were arrested in Tanzania because they have an anti-gay law, and some of them were being threatened to be subjected to forced anal exams to prove, looking for any kind of lesion, chlamydia, any kind of sexually transmitted disease to prove that they're gay so they could be thrown in jail for 25 years. Now, we don't need that type of human rights abuse happening around the world to gay people, to trans people, to lesbians. We should take this event to turn back the clock to what the history of this movement is about, fighting for civil rights, organizing as a community. We need to organize as a world community, and we can't do that in a bunch, if we disperse in a bunch of bars and cafes in the village. We need a big meeting place to have a political rally to try to like rekindle a global LGBT movement.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Gene Fedorko. I'm with Gay Liberation Front, and I was at the first march in 1970, and we marched up 6th Avenue. There were 3 or 4 abreast, and my recollection of the event was different than my colleague Jim Ferrat's. Maybe people on the sidelines supported us but could not come out. But the cars that were passing us on the right side, we were separated by a phalanx of police motorcycles. All the cars and trucks, the traffic that was passing us on 6th Avenue were yelling out, faggots, fucking dykes, sick people, all of these really horrendous insults. And we marched up 6th Avenue, and I think there is a huge poetic justice to reclaiming that route again and marching up 6th Avenue to Central Park. There could be nothing more symbolic on the 50th anniversary of Stonewall that we're celebrating. And I definitely agree with Eric's point that we have to have space for political dialogue, and that would be best accommodated in Central Park. Because those early years in Gay Liberation Front, that first march up 6th Avenue, the next year when we marched up 6th Avenue, there were all of these consciousness-raising groups, all of these community gatherings where Gay Liberation Front, where we talked about politics, 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 and strategy, and that definitely needs to happen in today's world. Thank you.
So, can you give us the background on 5th Avenue versus 6th Avenue? 6th Avenue has an obvious transit advantage for us for this year, but when did the parade move, or when did the march move avenues?
The march has been all over the place, going uptown, going downtown, starting on Central Park West, where the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade starts, and coming down and across and down 5th Avenue. Giuliani changed it so it would start below St. Patrick's Cathedral, so the Cardinal wouldn't have to look at us. The business owners in the village wanted to have us come downtown instead of going uptown into Central Park. And so it has moved around a lot. 5th Avenue, 6th Avenue, 1st Avenue, whatever. So 6th Avenue has a lot of history. We do think it's an easier avenue to go up, especially if we're starting at Sheridan Square. It's easier to just whip right over to 6th Avenue and up. So it's a practical solution. It's also an historic solution. So that's our thinking on it. But we're here to discuss any alternate plans or ideas. Go ahead. No, go. Okay.
Hi. You can call me Rosie. I've got to excuse my ignorance, but I'm curious. How do people get? Who's on Heritage of Pride? How are they like appointed to represent our community? Because I'm curious whether or not if there's either any legal mechanism or other mechanisms in which their control on this whole event is either, we get into and take over Heritage of Pride. I'm not talking about this coming year, but in future years. Or how do we influence that so that the whole community is together rather than being fractured in this unfortunate manner?
I don't have a microphone. Sorry. Jake, you can explain it? Yeah, I can answer it. It's volunteer-based, so you go to the meetings, and then you continue to go to them. Eventually you're voted on to be an official member, but anyone's able to go to the meetings. And there are also some requirements for members to do various community service activities.
Are they public?
Yes, they are public, but they don't do a great job of advertising them. But there is a calendar on their website that you can go to. The biggest reason that we don't work with, or that we haven't infiltrated in that way, is that it is really a slog to go through. It's usually multiple years of working with them, and the meetings themselves are like rough. I go to most of them to keep abreast of what's happening, but that's what's up. Also, I just want to announce we're about halfway through the meeting, and all of this is going to be very expensive. And so I want to encourage all of you. I'm going to pass around these bags for donations. They're first going to pay for this room because it's not free, but any additional money that we can get is just going to go towards these efforts. So I'm going to pass these around.
Heritage of Pride has some paid staffers. It has also evolved from an event that was originally community-based and organized, but as Andy Hum has explained to me many times, over the years, as more and more organizations grew up and more projects, people drifted off to other things. This was a once-a-year event that took a lot of planning, and so it sort of evolved into a more professional organization that drew the people who wanted to be involved with it. And that has more and more over the years become people who do come out of corporate worlds more than, I mean, there are some community people with activist backgrounds, but it's more the corporate crowd, and it does take many years to work up to any position of authority, whereas here everybody is an authority. That gentleman has a
hello, I'm Huckleberry, also known as Sister Lottie Da, and I'm essentially offering information based on my experience with the Drag March, which was born out of similar circumstances. And I became an impromptu marshal about 20 years ago, and so our relationship with the NYPD has changed over the years. And honestly, the personal relationships that we've developed with the community affairs officers specifically has aided in our negotiation of having a drag march permit-free, because parade without a permit is important to the ideology that we're protecting historically. But I also have to say, because the drag march next year happens on the actual anniversary of Stonewall 50, Heritage of Pride had started publicizing that they were going to have an event in front of Stonewall. And the community affairs officers at the 9th Precinct took it upon themselves to protect the drag march. And so I think it's interesting, because one of the crazy things that happens in this fairy magic that happens around the drag march is, for a brief moment, the army of the state becomes the army of the people. And it would be interesting to me, with our outreach to NYPD, and I'm completely interested in being involved in this, is to approach it through the Gay Officers League. Even though it has a bad taste in our mouth, I feel like, especially through my interactions with them over the World AIDS Days celebration, they're mentioning Black Lives Matters. They're ripe for information, and I feel like our strength is solidarity and empathy, and if we can get them as volunteers and not necessarily as paid individuals, I don't know. I'm an idealist, but it might be worth exploring and creating allies within the institution.
Thank you for that information. Mark?
Hi, Mark Milano, he, him. So I'd like to talk about what I don't want and what I do want to see on Pride. What I don't want to do is try anymore to work with HOP. Just in case anybody has any lingering thoughts about that, they've lied to us, they've suppressed us, they refused to allow a resistance contingents this year until we screamed and yelled, right? So if we did work with HOP, we would be buried invisible in midst of a corporate marketing platform. That's all it would be, and that's off the table for me. If that happens, I'm saying right now, I will not march. You know, I have no interest in doing that, right? So what do I want? I'm looking to the Drag March and to the Dyke March and to the Women's March, the one in 2017, not the other one, and other spontaneous marches like, you know, the anti-Iraq war marches of hundreds of thousands of people that happened with very little planning, right? So we don't need huge amounts of money and police presence. We just need to get tens of fucking thousands of people in the street and march up to Central Park. I'm not particularly concerned about the historic route or commemorating Stonewall. Stonewall has been commemorated and will be commemorated to death. My concern is a march that happens in the now, that addresses what is going on today. And what is going on today is that the rights we have fought for 50 years are being stripped away here in the US. That rights around the world are in serious jeopardy and people are being killed around the world. So I want a march that addresses what is happening now. Yes, we honor Stonewall, but we focus on all the shit that's going on now that we have to address. We do that by taking the street with very few police and with almost no goddamn barricades, right? If you look in the video that I made, at one point, the marchers are actually yelling off the sidewalks into the streets. Do we all remember that? I want this march to pick up people as it goes on. I do not want paraders and spectators. That's not what we are, right? We are people marching together up Fifth Avenue, and I really do want to end up in Central Park. I want a queer end, or whatever we call it up there, where we all get together and talk about the issues we're facing. So let's keep the logistics and the organizing and the money and the controlling to a minimum, and just get hopefully 100,000 people in the street, take the street, place our demands, and fuck all the rest.
So we're gonna, thank you. We're gonna have a few more comments about this question in particular, but we also want to, as we go along, start integrating the other questions because we're basically, through each of these questions, painting a communal vision of what we want. So the next question for folks to think about more specifically is, what do we want when we get to where we go, right?
Yeah.
If we go to Central Park, do we want it to
Can we
be
move to that question, or does anyone have any further compelling comments about the march itself?
Well, just
I think so.
yeah. I'm Jay. Just in response to this gentleman's question, which I thought was hasn't really been addressed, that this is the first year that we're going to do this alternative march in honor of Stonewall 50. This does not have to be the last year. Heritage of Pride puts on, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 events each year for Pride. So what if they just do one less? What if they just end up doing all their other events, but the community at large does the march every year, and we do a real march, and a real march about our rights and about our humanity and about common human rights and our common goals. That should be the moving forward part.
Okay. Couple of hands over there.
Just tying on to Jay's point, Paul Nocera, by the way, from By Request, among other groups, we think that part of the thing is the contracts that Heritage of Pride has already signed. It's highly corporatized, it's highly sponsored, and they're knee-deep in the money of that sponsorship. So as much as we'd like for them to do one less march, I don't personally think that that's what's going to happen, because they're tied. Unless they can convince their sponsors that the sponsorship will be spread among those other events, I think they're tied into, and that's probably why they're delayed, I don't know, but some of that delay in their getting their act together and making sort of formal comments is probably related to that.
Hi, Sage, she, her. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that, actually, the number 2 component, and stop focusing on Heritage of Pride just because, like, they're irrelevant. Like, really, at this point, they're done, and there's really no real need to focus on them because there's a lot of other stuff that we have to do and have to focus on. And specifically, like, to echo kind of what, I forgot your name, but what Mark was talking about, there's a lot of shit in the world right now. There's a lot of shit that are affecting our communities here in New York. And, like, I really do think that we can take this moment and shine lights on that, and for the LGBT community, and for the workers of the world, and for kind of everybody to come together and say, let's stop commodifying everybody. We're a community. Here we are. Here's what we want. Let's demand a few things. Let's be real loud. Let's be slightly louder than that. And, you know, do a thing in Central Park.
Let me just ask if Norman wants to say something at this point, or Norman Siegel.
First, it's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank Ann for Bill Dobbs for inviting me to once again litigate this issue. But listening to the comments, I'm at home. These comments have very, very hit me here in the sense of what's going on not only around the country but in the city right now. I go to a lot of meetings. There's no spirit about freedom and liberation in a lot of places. People have given up. So sitting here for the last 20 minutes and hearing speaker after speaker is very heartwarming and encouraging. Usually you go to this meeting and I was expecting for people to get up and start criticizing some of the plan. But hearing everybody say what they said, it's really good. The First Amendment is a powerful tool. From my experience going south in '66, Mississippi, Alabama, working with SNCC and SCLC, that movement understood what the First Amendment was about. And since that movement, including your movement and our movement, people have used the First Amendment to express themselves loud and louder, and in whatever way you can. There is a movement now, even in the city, to repress that. The idea of putting people in Central Park and separating them with barriers. If you take a look at the iconic visual of August 28, 1963, with Dr. King, I Have a Dream, 250,000 people all together. The Women's March, 1 and 2, they separated everyone. They wouldn't even let anyone go past Trump Tower. I tell the funny story, not so funny. I have 2 granddaughters. One was 16, the other was 13. I finally got them to come with me to Women's March 2. They sat on the street between 72 and 71 on Central Park West. Finally, the older one, Emma, said to me, "Grandpa, this is what protests are about?" I said, "Yes." And she says, "It sucks." And she said, "We want to go home." And I've been trying to get them to come back again because of that repression. We have a right to march whatever fucking block you want to march. They took away the Great Lawn in 1982, if I remember correctly. 1.2 million people in the anti-nuke march were there. The rule right now says at most 6 events a year. I don't think there's any political events except Global Corporation. They probably pay for that. I don't know for sure, but it's my instinct. So the idea that Bill and Ann were clever enough, smart enough to get in the permit for the march first and to put in a permit for the Great Lawn was legally very significant. In '94, one of the reasons we didn't necessarily win, although some people think we won anyway, is the argument was they had the first permit. We came second. So this time we're first. I think we're in good shape legally. We're going to meet with the general counsel from the Parks Department on the 13th. We'll figure out a strategy with the NYPD. That gentleman back there talking about getting the gay liberation law officers involved, get goal, and also with the community affairs is good strategy. We do that all the time. It's very important. And I think that if the spirit that's here tonight continues, and hopefully it does because we can't split apart, I think we can accomplish something historical and create a new precedent. Right now they say only 60,000 people can be at the Great Lawn. We're going to have to challenge that. They're going to ask for plans. They're going to give us a hard time. We're prepared to sit down and be reasonable, but also, as I've told Bill and Ann, if necessary, we'll go to federal court. And if necessary, we'll establish the principle. And I think I can think, when I was at Civil Liberties Union, we used to sit around and think of these kinds of abstract issues and then wait for the right kind of fact pattern to go. This is a great fact pattern. I couldn't make a great fact pattern. And the idea of the statements that were made today, because one of the issues the judge will say is, how is this different than the other group? And your ideological message and getting this tape and being able to cherry pick some of the statements in an affidavit is just ideal from a lawyer's perspective. And putting some of you on the stand to express what you've expressed here tonight. So not only people in New York City, not only people around the country, but around the world, because of the comments that people have made about what's going on internationally, we should be the leaders in trying to bring focus on that. And I think this is a perfect opportunity to raise all the issues that you've raised. And it is an honor to be the lawyer for the rebels. Thank you.
Thank you, Norman. Yeah. Do we want to take a straw poll as we go along, or wait till we go through all the questions?
We can do that. All right. Straw poll on question 1. Marching from the Village near Stonewall, Sheridan Square, up 6th Avenue to Central Park. Marching up 6th Avenue to Central Park. All those in favor? All those opposed? All those abstaining? We have a decision. Question?
I'd like to know, can we just like walk, it said near the stone wall, can't we just like all walk past the stone wall?
The idea is you have to start from somewhere. So our idea is to start at Sheridan Square, right in front of the Stonewall. So people will gather there and then start marching up 6th Avenue at 11 a.m. And yes, that's why we want to start there. That is why we are planning such a long march, because we do want to start there. I mean, we could start much farther uptown and make it a shorter march. And certainly not everyone has to march that whole route. You know, we can have a core group that starts there and gathers people as we go along. All right, question 2. Having a gathering, possibly a rally with stage and speakers in Central Park. Final configuration to be determined as we go along, but ending with an event in Central Park. We are discussing. Oh.
I thought that was about.
Sorry.
And
yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Bridget, she, her. I'm from GAG, and something that came to mind, Gays Against Guns, something that came to mind thinking about the park and getting the Great Lawn is really important, and having a huge stage and all of that. But I was also thinking about how when we participated in the March for Our Lives in Washington, D.C., which was a massive amount of people, we got a permit, Gays Against Guns, for a small square park down at in a part of the area where we were able to host our little fun thing and support everything that was going on. And so I was just thinking, because I know, you know, we as residents and various organizations, we can get permits for parts of the park for a number of people, like other places, and that maybe having large groups like various family organizations and all sorts of organizations and that can rent or get a permit for various parts of the park, and then they can kind of collaborate with each other and with the larger group as far as, you know, a map about where families can go find fun, or if you're interested in this or that, or all the things. You know, we have so much to offer the community that having all of us, everybody packed in is great, but I think having also something else happening, we might be able to do that if we could all individually get permits for
a timely
spaces.
Suggestion, since we are meeting with the Parks Department next
That's
week.
why I'm suggesting.
And we may not even need permits. Maybe it's just sending people to different areas.
Basically, if you want to gather more than 25 people and by invitation of any sort to a particular part of the park, you need a permit.
Thank you, Mayor Giuliani. Yes.
or 20 people, right? So it's just a matter of getting a permit and to say, you know, like the center could get a permit, GAG could get a permit for a spot.
Explore that next week. Thank you.
Amanda Sheeher. So I'm not sure about how many people and the permits, but just my personal vision in Central Park would be some kind of central stage. Though I'm not, even though I love a dance like anyone else, I don't like the celebrity, celebrity show kind of thing. No, but I feel like we'd need some kind of central stage. But I imagine, as Jim spoke about and Eric, like having different areas with different political issues, social issues, what have you. Just stands where people can go and speak, whether that is a stand or just a blanket on the ground, and whether that needs a particular permit. I don't know. Like, do you just get one permit for the whole of Sheep's Meadow, what have you?
And probably the Great Lawn rather than Sheep's Meadow. But I'll also say, just to keep us on track and get us out of here close to time, that what we want to discuss now is, do we want to end up in Central Park with some kind of event? Details to be figured out. Let's not get too distracted by that, even though it is the sexy, fun thing to discuss. Anyone over here?
Carolina Sheeher. My only question for Gays Against Guns, which I think is absolutely excellent organization, and I've participated, is that you have to be careful not to get fenced in if you get separate permits.
Good point.
Yeah, over here. Yeah, I think we do want to have a rally. I think we do need a stage, speakers. Central Park is a logical place just because of there's big open spaces where we can hopefully pull a whole bunch of people together. I'm certainly hoping that we get a lot more than 60 people, or 60,000 people. The idea of like side event in other spaces is a good one. We could even use that strategy of putting up some video screens, in some other areas of the park if they're trying to, not to block us from having 60,000 people in one space. But I'd like to see, that Great Lawn completely flooded and overfilling and spilling, a long ways away. So I'm in favor and would even suggest we vote that.
All right, again, not too many details.
The current rule, because they've changed the accessibility the current rule, because they've changed the accessibility to the Great Lawn, the current rule and regulation says maximum 60,000, and the group has to show a plan that it won't go over 60,000. The approach, especially with your comment, would be to challenge that rule, to actually demonstrate, and we have pictures of back in '82 with 1.2 million, to try to demonstrate to the city that that rule is a violation of the First Amendment. As long as it's a peaceful demonstration in the park, and we can demonstrate that the park can accommodate more than 60,000, that we should be able to do that. If they say no, we would go to federal court to try to challenge that. And the reasoning that they make this argument is they resodded the Great Lawn with great care and great cost. And they have experts who will say that when people are standing on this new grass, in fact, it damages the park and they don't want to go back to the way it used to be. We will then have to get experts to say that that's just delusional and that there is a First Amendment, even if it's accurate, that in balance gives the people the right to demonstrate. And that's why this event, historical, 50th anniversary, Stonewall, is the perfect case to try to challenge that, to liberate, as we're talking about liberation, to liberate the park. And similarly in Times Square, we used to have big rallies on Saturday and Sunday afternoons. And basically that all changed too, so you can't even get permits there anymore. Maybe it has something to do with the matinees on Saturday and Sunday afternoon. But the point is, when you're talking about free speech and political protest. We don't have any place in New York City. Women's March 1, 2, the gun march, gun control march, they didn't have a place that most cities around the country have, where you go to a central location and you can have 100,000 people. We've got to challenge that, and this will be a vehicle for that.
Let's begin.
Hi. My
Or
name
we
is
could have wristbands.
my name is Jimmy Dudding, and I wanted to add, as a gay man, that this is very inspiring. Very inspired by this message. It's words can't say for me. And just to touch base on doing music in Central Park, I think Central Park is a great location. There's a lot of space, and as a musician, I would like to give back in that way and align with this message in that way.
Thank you. Are we ready to, the temptation is to get to the details, but I think we're ready to vote on whether or not we want to end up in Central Park with some kind of event in Central Park, details to be determined. Can we take a vote on that? All in favor of that? All opposed? That was not a vote against. All abstaining. All right. So that is passed. On to what I hope will be a brief or no discussion, not allowing floats in the march. Now, let's just say we need to plan for transportation for those who need help because they are physically disabled. We are committed to doing that. And we certainly welcome people to be creative, as the discussion of the Halloween parade and the drag march noted. We're not trying to cut down on people's creativity, costumes, banners, signs, all of that. But the idea is not to do corporate floats and not to do floats at all, because what we want is a people's march uptown. Do we need a discussion of that? Do people have comments on that?
Just a question. A float is a motorized vehicle?
Yes. What did you have in mind?
People powered, large structures.
I was, yeah, well, cool it. Now, cool it. Maybe a rowboat. Maybe something. All right, can we take a vote on that? All in favor of no floats in the march? All right, all opposed? All in opposition? Oh, all abstaining? I'm afraid you've lost the vote. Sure, do you have a comment? Give him a microphone.
I forget I project that sometimes I have to use this thing. So for me, what sometimes floats allowed is an expansion of human creativity. And one of my favorite things to see sometimes, like in the smaller scale parades that are not like this commercial gag reflex insisting thing, like the Brooklyn Pride Parade, for example, it's like people get their little vehicles and then like put everything up. And like sometimes people that have kids, or sometimes that people that have mobility issues, being able to have like a vehicle like that and using it as part of their expression,
sure,
is such an important thing.
Sure.
That's what I mean.
It'd be like a Shriners parade with people in little cars. Sorry, they had one of those here years ago. It was cute. Having as few barricades as possible so people can join the march at any point. Is there anyone here in favor of heavy barricading in this march?
Explain the heavy versus light.
All right. Well, the point is that they now a lot of this is tied to 9/11 and fears of terrorism. We think that's a crazy formula, because a barricade is not going to stop someone determined to cause violence and havoc, but it will prevent people from getting out of the area, just as a basic formula. And HOP has literally stopped letting people into the parade. And the way they accomplish that often is with heavy barricading. And then the cops and the HOP people are under orders to reject people who try to join the parade?
There are different levels of barricades you can have at a march. So first of all, you can have no barricades at all, which the huge spontaneous marches do quite well with, right? The next level up is you can have the wooden barricades, which are quite easy to get through if you want to, but still do some separation. The next level is what I saw at the Filipino Day Parade, which is you do have the metal interlocking barricades, but at every street intersection, anybody can go into the march and join it. So that's a compromise position. And the last one is what they do for the Heritage of Pride Parade and St. Patrick's Day Parade, where everything is blocked and you have to walk like 6 blocks to get across the street or whatever. I think we should go for no barricades at all, but move up to wooden barricades if we have to, and let's just go for the minimum level of barricading possible. That's what the proposal is.
And that includes our own promise, as we have said in these permit applications, to provide our own security, which is basically what you saw in the video of people interlocking hands to block intersections, things like that.
I'll just hand the microphone back because that's what I was going to point out from Jim's footage, seeing the human barricades, which then makes an organic experience and we can allow people in and it breathes. And again, it just requires educating the NYPD that this can work, because you guys are vanguards and I believe that you can change anyone's mind.
Sister Lottie Da will be in charge of all police negotiations.
The only thing I was going to say is I think it does make sense to have some kind of a police presence to block cars from going the wrong day and running us down like they're doing to people they hate, but ISIS and other people. So that's the only type of thing that I think should happen. I don't think we should have even those wooden barricades in the middle of blocks to keep people from leaving the sidewalks and into the streets.
Andy, he, him. The topic of police has come up in our meetings for months and months and months. It's been an ongoing issue that we've discussed from a variety of perspectives. There are people who say police and the presence of police makes them feel safer, and there are people who say police and the presence of police makes them feel less safe. And I think to the extent we've had those conversations, we've largely sided with the second camp, that we're in support and in community with people who feel less safe in the presence of police. So we have lots of time between now and the march. Those conversations will likely continue, but it is something we've thought about and addressed, and can continue to do so.
I think as it relates to the car component, we're New Yorkers. I mean, come on, we're walking here. But in all seriousness, there's a lot of people and there's not a lot of cars, and people can just as easily stop traffic as police folks can, and the cars are not going to go through them. It's just not going to happen. So yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add to that the sort of fear that the NYPD has a history of trying to instill in the populace in order to make the populace accept more and more police control of our movements, of our highways. That's the kind of thing that we have to reject. It's when we move to the period where we're negotiating with the NYPD, which will be a difficult negotiation because the NYPD always wants to exert as much control as possible on any public assembly. So they will try it. We just have to be strong and stand up against it.
Yeah, can I just say, do you want to use the model that has been used at the Dyke marches and other things, like our own marshals, and you have marshal training, et cetera? Yeah, so, okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to repeat some of these points, but I think, again, as we're thinking about the question of liberation, as we're approaching the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, as we recognize that in a lot of our conversations where folks like Goal have been present, folks from the mayor's office, we can't even get the NYPD to apologize for their role in Stonewall, right? That it is important for us to recognize those who are the most marginalized in our community and take this stance to start off with a no barricades, no police, right? As we know, right, and that there have been huge marches where marshals, both extremely heavily organized, marshals kind of growing out of protests organically, have been able themselves to direct traffic, control traffic, keep folks safe. I think we should shoot for those examples, try those models, and that we know that I think one of the things we're seeing is that the police constantly assert power anyways, right? That we begin with the progressive position. We start saying no, right? Knowing that it's a huge battle we're going to be fighting, and that not just this question of safety, but they freak out, the city freaks out, the NYPD freaks out when there's going to be tens of thousands of folks marching, permitted or unpermitted, right? So that all of this has to be kept in mind as we think about what this can look like and how the city will respond to it as well.
Thank you. Anyone else on this topic, or can we take a sense of the room? Yeah, yeah.
We probably covered
4
and 5.
All right, so let's look at 4 and 5. 4, having as few barricades as possible so people can join the march at any point. All in favor? All opposed? All abstaining? 2 abstentions. Okay. Point 5, demanding a significantly reduced police presence. All in favor? Okay. All opposed? All abstaining? 1 abstention. All right, ensuring the march is accessible.
Talk about what that means exactly, though, right?
Okay. I want to get to the committee discussion, so I'm trying.
We do. We have an accessibility committee.
All right. Andy wants to say something. I'm sorry, Jake wants to say something. What was that little dance, Jake?
Thank you. That was my waiting for the mic dance.
Okay.
I'm Jake Him, by the way. I don't know if I introduced myself last time. The one thing I want to add to this is that when we think about accessibility, we need to think about everything that means. So, and we need to be conscious about integrating that on every level of what we're doing. So it's not just saying we're going to have a van for people who can't walk the entire route. It means we're going to have people with disabilities who are making decisions about what we're doing with our money, who are helping to plan all of the events, everything. So it's a completely integrated into our structure. And additionally, when we talk about accessibility, it's not limited to traditional disability ideas, but the idea that if you're poor and homeless, you might feel unsafe at this, and that actually is an accessibility issue as well. It makes the parade or the march less accessible to you. And so all of that, I think, is part of what we're talking about with accessibility, and it needs to be integrated at every level of organization. So at least when I see that, that's what I'm interpreting it to mean.
Well said, Jake. Thank you. Anyone else ready to vote?
No.
Okay. Ensuring the march is accessible fully and deeply. All in favor? All opposed? All abstaining? All right. All right, we've gotten through all the proposals. All right, so now the work begins, as they say. The great work begins, to quote Tony Kushner. So we in our meetings have brainstormed about committees. There is an enormous amount of work to be done. Our general idea is that if we have, I think, 5 or 6 overall committees, that can then break down the work within each of those committees. So if, for instance, you're on the media committee, You don't have to do all the media. You just have to do your little part of it. So what we would like to do is very quickly have a point person or two from each of the committees we've envisioned come up and just talk for a second about what it might involve. And then you can sign up for a committee, and the committees can caucus briefly in corners of the room to decide when and where they're going to meet. The beauty of the committee system is you can meet anytime and anywhere you want. You don't have to come here. You can meet in coffee shops or homes or parks or wherever. But we need to get the work done. And that means if everyone does a little, then all this gets done.
And just to note, the 5 committees as folks come up, there's logistics, and that's logistics for the entire event. There's a media/education committee. There's a coordination/fundraising committee. There's an outreach committee, and there's an accessibility and inclusion committee. Jake, since you're here, do you want to talk about coordinating?
Yes.
fundraising?
So I'm going to be the point person right now for the coordination and fundraising committee. That kind of encompasses 2 things. A, it's a lot of administrative work. It's making sure that we have spaces to meet. It's making sure that all of the groups are communicating with each other and that they have opportunities to do so. The other side of it is that we deal with all the money. So first of all, tonight we collected $513. So thank you very much. This is not only taking care of the money, but it's also raising the money. So if you have experience with event planning, if you know how to throw a fundraiser, how to court donors, all of this stuff, I can even teach you. I do it professionally. So come and say hi. We'll probably be doing a lot of things in between now and the march as well, and instead of just planning on the march day specifically.
Also, as we're organizing folks to get into the committees briefly.
I'll be way back that way, like against the wall over there.
So if you're interested in the fundraising, coordinating, join Jake over there. Also,
We'll have sign-up sheets, right?
yep, each committee rep will have a sign-in sheet for folks interested in that committee, and we'll also leave sign-in sheets at the table specific to each committee as well.
This is Mary Ellen. I just have a quick question. As far as outreach and everything else, this is World Pride, and as Eric was saying that there are issues that affect beyond just New York. Are there plans that you're going to be reaching beyond just the New York area? So I just want to make sure that that's part of it. So you guys will pay me $5 later?
Yeah, later. So outreach, I can talk about that. We are planning to split the work in outreach in 3 subcommittees or groups, depending, how we organize. Exactly. Oh yes, we're working in international outreach. We have several groups from around the world so far that have endorsed our vision, and I can mention Canada so far, France, UK, Germany. But we have contacts with a lot of other people that are still going through their formal process to endorse. So in the outreach, we want them to endorse our vision first, because that gives us momentum and gives us strength in negotiating with the city, with the police, and everything that needs to be done. Then we want people to come. That's the other major, whether locally, nationally, or internationally. We want them to come to our march. The more, the better. And if they cannot come, that's the other thing that we want to do, that will encourage them to have their own Stonewall 50 event. The way we plan to work is when it comes to international outreach, it's mostly emails, communication, phone calls. Locally, we will probably have to work a little differently. We plan to then go to other groups' events, so there will be also first-hand contact and try to reach out to them. So there is a lot of different kinds of work to do, and if anything of that is of any interest, please come and talk to me and call in after this and sign up for the outreach committee. We'll meet down here. Yes.
Yeah. So as Enrico was saying, and thanks for that question, right? There's a already blossoming international committee that's part of the outreach committee. I'll be tackling the more local issues. We're really looking for someone who wants to tackle national outreach, but we're looking for lots of people, but yes, this work is happening. Media and education is next.
Hi, folks. Paul again from By Request, and now Reclaim Pride. Yeah. So media messaging, media education is social media. It's research and education about our various issues and points and perspectives. It's print, it's radio, it's TV, it's YouTube, it's web and graphic design, it's video and sound editing, it's writing, both community and mainstream messaging oversight. We just basically need partners to join us in all of that. We've got active accounts on all the various social media, and we need people to put these things into phrases and into words and into paragraphs and things that we can get them out.
Thanks, Andy, he, him. We want to let you know we have a full service website. What we're hoping is that all of you, if you have not yet, will hit that Get Involved button right at the top on the left, where there's a way for individuals and groups to sign on. We want you to endorse our vision for the 2019 March. We have all of the social media buttons right up there on top. There's a way to subscribe to our newsletter, everything you might need. And if it's not up here yet, we'll get that added for you. And then, reclaimpridenyc.org. Thank you. And then one other little shout out. If anyone speaks multiple languages, we'd love to have some translations, both for New York City outreach and for that international outreach we talked about. So anyone who can help us get our materials into other languages, that would be very helpful. Again, reclaimpridenyc.org.
And we're meeting under the second screen on the right.
Over here.
Beautiful. It's outside.
All right. Someone to represent logistics?
You want to go ahead? Okay, so logistics is fairly self-explanatory. It's a beast in terms of the amount of things that have to be done logistically to organize something like this. We'll have to be organizing the kickoff site as well as the rally at the end, sound both en route, marshals to block the traffic at each intersection and help progress the march. We'll have to come up with a sound system at the rally. We'll have to come up with portable toilets, with water, with the stage, alternative sites if that's something that we want to have, like splinter topical gatherings in the park. So several. So it's a hell of a lot of work. It's kind of the nuts and bolts. And we've agreed to kind of kickstart this. We're not like agreeing to like do all the logistics ourselves, but we're going to need a hell of a lot of help.
And I'm Robert with the Radical Fairies, and I think there's about 10 of us here tonight. So yeah. So we're here to help make it joyous and beautiful and right, create communities. And so it's a lot of work, yeah, so join us.
And we're
going
going
to, and it depends on money, I mean, we're going to need a lot of money. We have to really coordinate if we want a big stage and everything. So we'll take it as we can. And I really want it to be really, really concerned about taking care of the people who need to be cared for in this community, that we hold them and carry them in every aspect of developing the logistics.
Right, so we'll organize over here kind of by the sign-in table, and we'd love to have you come sign up to help.
Can we sort of take a poll of like what people are interested in doing?
We got one more committee to present, I think.
Yep.
Hi.
Accessibility and inclusion.
Yeah, accessibility and inclusion. Hi, I'm Gabriel, and any pronoun, it's okay. This is Nay, and you can come talk to us. We're going to make sure that people of all different abilities can participate in the march and in the rally, and like Jake said, like people who have other needs that are not just about their bodies. Come talk to us. Yeah.
Here, we're meeting
right here in the middle.
Right here.
All right, so Andy's right. Let's get a little putting people on record. So we've announced 5 committees. Is there anything we've missed that people want to propose? All right. So let's start with those. They're all big umbrellas. They're all going to break down into smaller components. You don't have to be responsible for everything that happens with this. The smaller, the better. Yes?
Just a question. So we formed the committees today, and then we meet next week, and we'll work in the committees. Or is that what's happening?
We have discussed that as one thing, but we meet here every Wednesday night from 7 to 9. So one thing we've discussed is maybe the committees would like to meet here next week, 7 to 9. But frankly, the committees can decide to do anything they want.
Okay.
So let's start by saying we have logistics, we have media, we have coordination, outreach, and accessibility. So show of hands, how many people want to be involved with logistics? Excellent. How many people, that's excellent. How many people want to be involved with outreach? Excellent. How many people want to be involved with media? Excellent. Excellent. They need a lot of help. What else? Coordination and fundraising. We got a couple of people, a few people. Excellent. And accessibility and inclusion. All right, we got a few of them too. All right, so let's split up into those groups. We'll get you to sign up with your name and contact information. You can decide whether you want to meet here next week on Wednesday or somewhere else sometime else. What do we got? Coordination in the back over there. Who's over there? Media over there. Outreach right here in front. Logistics in the back over there. And accessibility over here. Accessibility there. Yeah. Accessibility over here. Right there. Outreach here. Sign up for outreach.